Nandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Jaya Jamuna Thira Vanara Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Stotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naran Shaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasupraya Shirabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Anartho Pasanam Sakshat Bhakti Yogam Zadhoksaje Lokasya Janato Vidvams Chakri Satbhava Samhitam Yaswanubhavam Akila Shruti Sadamekam Madhyatmandipamati Shatam Tamonindam Shamsharinam Karunaya Puranaguyam Tam Vyasasunam Upayami Gurum Muninam. So, for this verse, should I read the Sanskrit of the first one, or I just read the Sanskrit of all of them, and then the verse I'll speak on, everyone else can follow? Okay. So I'll just read these Sanskrit, so no one repeat these first ones, and I'll tell you when to repeat. Satasapatya ucha naradevaya bhavato nagham tavan manaksitam astekam prakatam agham yat ihe driktvam apraja. The head priest said, O king, in this life we do not find any sinful activity even within your mind. So you are not in the least offensive, but we can see that in your previous life you performed sinful activities due to which, in spite of your having all qualification, you have no son. Purport. The purpose of marrying is to beget a son, because a son is necessary to deliver his father and forefathers from any hellish conditional life in which they may be. Chanaka Pandit therefore says, Putrahinam griham sunyam. Without a son, married life is simply abominable. King Anga was a very pious king in this life, but because of his previous sinful activity, he could not get a son. It is concluded, therefore, that if a person does not get a son, it is due to his past sinful life. Tata sadaya badram te atmanam suprajam ripa ishaste te putra kamasya putram dasyanti yagyabuk. O king, we wish all good fortune for you. You have no son, but if you pray at once to the Supreme Lord and ask for a son, and if you execute the sacrifice for that purpose, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will fulfill your desire. Tatasva bhaga deyani grahisyanti dviyuksaha yat yagya purusha sakshat aprapyaya harim vritaha. When Hari, the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices, is invited to fulfill your desire for a son, all the demigods will come with him and take their shares in the sacrifice. Purport. Whenever a sacrifice is performed, it is meant for satisfying Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of the fruits of all sacrifices. And when Lord Vishnu agrees to come to a sacrificial arena, all the demigods naturally follow their master, and their shares are offered in such sacrifices. The conclusion is that the sacrifices performed are meant for Lord Vishnu, not for the demigods. So we'll read this verse together. Tams Tan Kaman Hari Dadyat Yan Kamanyate Janaha Ararito Yataiva Saha Tata Pumsam Palodayaha Tamstan Kaman Harir Danyat Yan Kamya Yate Jana Aradito Yatayevasya Tata Pumsam Palodayaha Tamstan Kaman Harir Dadyat Yan Kamyate Janaha Aradito Yatavaisya Tata Pumsam Palodayaha. So this Palo Dayaha, in English the PH is pronounced as Pa, but with the diacritics it comes out as Palodaya, not Phalodaya. So Pala is fruit. So it's the same thing. If you look at the word for word, Pala Udaya. So it's the fruit of the activity. So it's not Pala, but Pala. Tamstan Kaman Harir Dadyat Yan Kamyate Janaha Haradito Yataivyasya Tata Pumsam Palodayaha. Palodayaha. Tams, or Matajis? Anyone? No? Not many Matajis here. Okay. Tan, those. Kaman, desired objects. Harihi, the Lord. Dadyat, will award. Yan, whatsoever. Kamanyate, desires. Janaha, the person. Araditaha, being worshipped. Yata, as. Eva, certainly. Eshaha, the Lord. Tata, similarly. Pumsam, of men. Palaudaya, the result. The performer of sacrifices under karma kanda activities achieves the fulfillment of desires for which he worships the Lord. Purport: in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he awards benedictions to the worshipper according to his desire. The Supreme Personality of Godhead gives all living entities conditioned within this material world full freedom to act in their own way. But to his devotee, he says that instead of working in that way, it is better to surrender unto him, for he will take charge of the devotee. That is the difference between a devotee and a fruitive actor. The fruitive actor enjoys only the fruits of his own activities, but a devotee, being under the guidance of the Supreme Lord, simply advances in devotional service to achieve the ultimate goal of life, to go back home, back to Godhead. The significant word in this verse, kaman, which means sense gravitatory desires. A devotee is devoid of all kaman. He is anyabhilashita sunya. A devotee is always devoid of all desires for sense gratification. His only aim is to satisfy or gratify the senses of the Lord. That is the difference between a karmi and a devotee. Om Jnana Timidandasya Jnananjana Shalakoya Chakshurun Minitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svam Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varshabhavani Devi Dayataya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnanam Daine Pravave Namaha Madhurya Ujvala Premadhya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktita Shri Gora Karuna Shaktis Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Sadanta Dandvanta Harine Namom Gorikishoraya Sakshat Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambode Parambo Jayate Namaha Namom Bhaktivinodaya Satchiranandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaur Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdesa Sajana Priyaha Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Sri Jagannatayate Namaha Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratvase Namaha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopeshwa Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpa Tarumisya Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Durgame Patimenantasya Sakalat Paragatir Muhur Svakripa Yastidanena Santa Sanfavalambanam Dande Nichaya Trinakam Parayorni Patyat Kridvasakakam Sata Etadaham Bravimi He Sarava Sakalameva Vihaya Durat Goranga Chandra Charane Kurutanuragam. Hare Krishna. My pleasure to be here in Bengaluru or Bangalore. Which one is it? And it's a pleasure for me to be able to speak on the Srimad Bhagvatam, which is our very means of conquest for overcoming the tension of material existence. Srila Vyasadeva, or rather Srila Sutta Goswami, describes in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Ya samohito jiva atmanam tri gunatmakam paropti manute nartam takritam cha vipadyate. That the living entity, although transcendental to this material body, considers himself to be the material body, and due to this identification with the material body, he's undergoing various kinds of suffering. So in the next verse says, Anartho pasanam satshat bhakti yogam zadhoksaje lokasya chanato vidvams chakre satvava samhitam. That in order to counteract this anartha of bodily identification, we identify with our gross body in the form of our family, in form of the physical body, in the form of society. In so many ways we identify with the physical body, but even more so, we're identified with the subtle body. Srila Prabhupada explains that liberation from the material body is extremely easy. You just have to give up the physical body. We've actually been liberated from the physical body many, many millions of times. But our primary connection with this world is not from the physical body. Our primary connection with this material world is through the subtle body. So anartho pasanam sakshat bhakti yoga matoksaje lokasya ajanato vidvams chakre satvava samhitam. That those who are ajanato, this Srimad Bhagavatam has been spoken by them to eradicate the anartha of bodily identification with the false ego. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's explained, Prakriti kriyamanani guni karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatmam kartaha miti manyate. That we consider ourselves a part of this world, and due to being falsely identified with this material world, we act in various ways. And Lord Rishabhdev explains, Tavat kriyas tavas idam manovai karmatmakam yena sharira bandha. That these activities that we engage in with our physical body and our subtle body, these things color our consciousness in a particular way. And due to this coloring of consciousness, we travel from one body to another. Shariram karmatmakam yena sharira bandha. Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadramai ki jai. Lakshman Hanuma Lakshmi Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki jai. Shri Shri Radha. Hare Krishna. So in this way, the living entity is looking for various ways in which it can be happy due to identification with this material body. And many people thinking that this material body is a source of happiness, they organize their life in such a way to be comfortable with the material body. And this organization of facilities for material comfort, they lose their focus into the ultimate purpose of life. Bhogeshvarya prasaktanam taya pritita chetasam vyasya atmaka buddhir samudo navadiyate. That fixity in spiritual attainment never arises in the heart of one who is trying to organize the material energy in such a way that they can be happy here. And in their quest to try to find satisfaction in this world, there's this idea that if I can cooperate with a higher authority, if I can cooperate with an entity who has more power than I do, then through the power of attorney, I can also attain some of that ability, and my material situation can improve. Trividyamam soma pata puta papa. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita that people in this world, following the Vedas, they worship various demigods, they worship various living entities for the purpose of improving their material standard of life. But this is all materialistic. So we see in this pastime of King Anga that Dhruva Maharaj has gone back to Godhead, and King Anga is the glorious descendant of Dhruva Maharaj. And King Anga is a devotee, but he has a problem. He doesn't have a son. And as was being said in the previous purport, that family life without a son is abominable. And especially if one is a king, family life without a son is completely intolerable. So King Anga is experiencing intense anxiety due to this identification with this world, thinking that I'm a king, thinking that I have so many duties to perform. Although he's a pure devotee, there's a way in which we can become implicated in the circumstances of this world and become implicated in the duties of this world. And those implications cause us various kinds of anxieties. Yehi samsparsada bhoga dukayonaya evate. So King Anga is trying to organize material facilities in such a way that he can attain a son. But we can see as this pastime progresses that through the performance of, which is being mentioned by Srila Prabhupada here, sacrifices under karma kanda activities, that no matter how one tries to adjust the circumstances of this world, what's written on the label of this world will always come forth. Just like if you buy a Coca-Cola, written on the label, it says contains caffeine. No matter how you try to consume it, the active ingredient of caffeine will always be present. So in the same way, in this material world, no matter how you try to adjust circumstances, no matter how you try to elevate yourself, what's written on the label will always come forth. Dukalayam ashashvatam. Your circumstances will turn out to be miserable, and those circumstances that you arrange, although seemingly permanent, will ultimately be temporary. So this life of trying to adjust material circumstances for eternal pleasure, trying to adjust temporary circumstances for eternal pleasure, is what is known as avidya, ignorance. And the Sri Upanishad explains that one result is obtained by the culture of nescience, and one result is obtained by the culture of knowledge. So those who have material desires, kamastaster hitagyanam prapadyante na devataha. Those who have material desires, they generally don't worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as Hari, who's interested in eradicating your material circumstance in order to give you the great treasure of Krishna Prema. Rather, people approach those who can provide the material facilities that they desire. And nowadays, people are so shameless, they don't even approach the Devatas. Nowadays, as Srila Prabhupada explains in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. People approach executive businessmen, government officials, and they no-toe to the desires of those government officials and businessmen in order to be provided facility for the material comfort. And as Govindadas prays, Dulabha Manava Janama Satsange. Sorry, I'm missing. Is that right? Yeah. That Govindadas prays that because of serving materialistic men, because of serving materialistic desires, because of serving a materialistic family, I've been cast into this ocean of material suffering. And due to this, I'm completely miserable. So people, they don't even worship devatas who are representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. People are so shameless in this Kali Yuga that rather than approaching someone who has some connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, people approach atheistic men in order to accommodate their material desires. But this life of working so hard for material comfort, it is not recommended by the teachings of the Srimad Bhagvatam. Nayam deho devo bhajam nirloke kastam kama hartate vid bhujamye tapo divyam puraka yena shatvam suryeta yasmat brahmasaukyam tvanantam. That to simply work for the satisfaction of the material body is not very intelligent, because the satisfaction which is available to this material body is available in any form of life that you can find. So why work hard for the satisfaction of a material body which is ultimately going to drop dead? Rather, it is recommended that one take up tapo divyam, divine austerities. And divine austerities can only be performed in relationship to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vedanti tat tatvat vidyas tatvam yaj ganamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. So whether one is trying to approach the impersonal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, if one is trying to approach the partial representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead situated within the heart, or if one is trying to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly in the form of Bhagavan, it is recommended that one take up divine austerity under the guidance of a pure devotee. Mahat sevam dwaram ahor vimuktes tamo dwaram yositi sangi sangam. Most people are simply trying to serve the desires of their material senses, so therefore they accept the masters who are addicted to the opposite sex, and that addiction of their masters to the opposite sex infects them with that same addiction. And so therefore they open up their life to the lowest form of consciousness, in which their life becomes progressively worse and worse. But for those who have decided to accept tapodivyam, their life becomes very glorious. Mahat sevam dwaram ahor vimuktes. The doors of liberation and the doors of spiritual elevation are immediately open to that person who accepts service under the guidance of a pure devotee. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he used to explain that people in this world, they are like a boy. He used to tell this story that once there was a boy flying a kite on the roof. In India, people like to hang out on the roof, I've noticed. It's true? Especially drying clothes. So, this boy is playing on a roof, and a roof doesn't have any barricades. It doesn't have any type of way to protect people from going off the roof. So the boy is playing on the roof with his kite, and he's flying the kite in the sky, running here and there, and his friends are cheering him on. They're cheering him on, cheering him on, cheering him on, and then a wise man comes, and he sees that this boy is about to run off the roof. So he catches the boy before he runs off the roof. He takes the kite, he clips the kite with scissors, and then lets the kite go, and then tells the boy, you have to be very careful. Otherwise, you could be in danger. And the boy, in retaliation, begins to chastise the old man. And furthermore, his friends begin to chastise the old man. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that this is the condition of people in this world. That those who are under the guidance and shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they accept the divine austerity of going out and giving Krishna consciousness to other people. They accept the divine austerity of tapyanti lokatapena, sadhavo prayasojanaha, paramaradhanam tadi, purushaishakyalatmanaha. They accept the trouble of being neglected. They accept the trouble of being insulted, of being subjected to cold conditions, hot conditions, having to travel at all times of the day, having to associate with materialistic people for the purpose of giving people the opportunity to hear about the ultimate goal of life. But people in this world are such that although the saintly devotees of the Lord, they perform this divine austerity, paramaradhanam tadi. Not only is it a divine austerity, but it's the highest form of worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the service which is most pleasing to Krishna, to go out and accept voluntary suffering for the benefit of others. But despite the fact that devotees go and do that, foolish materialists who are simply paving their way to a lower and lower forms of life, although they're given warning about the nature of their activities, when the sadhu comes and cuts their material attachments, those people, they simply retaliate by insulting the sadhu. So this is the life of a preacher. This is the life of one who is spreading Krishna consciousness. And the difference between a devotee and this fruitive worker who is so foolish in their activities, thinking that they'll find happiness in temporary circumstances. The difference between the devotee and this person is that the devotee does not consider himself to be the source of his maintenance. A materialist thinks that by my work, by my going to the university, by my going to America, by my working so hard to build up a big bank account, I'm the one who's created this beautiful family. I'm the one that's created this beautiful home. I'm the one that's bought this beautiful car. Ahankara vimudatman kartaham ityamanyate. This is all Maya's joke. This is Maya's big joke on the living entity. To think that you are the source of your maintenance. And in this way, the living entity works. Nunam pramata kurute vikarma. They become entangled in the unwanted activity of this material world, vikarma. But a devotee is different. A devotee feels Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate te samnitya biyukta mam yoga kshema vinamyaham. That if I simply surrender to Krishna, if I simply give my entire life to serving Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then all of my material facilities will be taken care of. Even if I don't work hard for filling my belly, even if I don't work hard for attaining shelter, Krishna will provide everything in my life, provided I accept the one instruction of worshiping Him exclusively. So the cause of our suffering is lack of this consciousness. The cause of our suffering in this world, the cause of our lamentation is a lack of this fixity of consciousness, that having faith that Krishna will protect me in all circumstances, always and everywhere. And even if material facilities are not provided, I have faith that Krishna will at the very minimum protect my faith. And what is that faith? Krishna bhakti koila sarva karma krita hoy. That simply by serving Krishna, I have fulfilled the purpose of all other activity. That the perfection of my life is going on serving Krishna in any circumstance, whether favorable or unfavorable. And this is the example that we see from King Anga. He performs his duty perfectly. He does what he can in order to get a son. But when circumstances turn against him, he sees this as an opportunity to take full shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the nature of a devotee. Taraskrita vipralabdha shaptashkipta hata api. I'm forgetting this verse. This is a verse which is quoted in relationship to glorification of Maharaj Parikshit, in which Maharaj Parikshit is cursed to die in 7 days, but he doesn't retaliate against that curse. Rather, he takes it as the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the nature of a devotee is that any circumstances which are coming into my life, any obstacles, any reversals which are coming into my life, because I have fully surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I can understand that this is simply a manifestation of His Vihami. This is His way of preserving and protecting me. And anything that is coming into my life is favorable, is positive, and it is only going to help me develop a higher state of consciousness. Labante Brahma Nirvanam Rashanek Shina Kalmasa Chiditaitva Yadatmanam Sarva Bhute Rate. One of the qualities of a devotee who's on a high level of consciousness is that he is free from the dualities of this world. He doesn't consider the good and evil of this world to be relevant in his life, because he considers that the only good that exists is the mercy of Krishna. And if Krishna's mercy is present in my life, then even if the material world is burning all around me, then I can have faith that I am properly situated. But even if I have the most materially comfortable situation, even if I am properly situated in all my materialistic activities, even if I've performed all dharmas, karmas, whatever it may be, if I have not pleased the Supreme Personality of Godhead, dharma svanistitam pumsam vikshakshena katasyaha napadayat yadiratim shrama eva hi kevalam, then I have wasted my time, because I have not pleased the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So King Anga is performing this out of a sense of duty, being a king, but he is not concerned with the result. And as you can see, the circumstances, as all circumstances in the material world will do, they turn against him. And what manifests is the birth of King Vena, who had no respect for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who used to kill his friends for fun as a child. And King Anga was in complete anxiety knowing that this was his son. And rather than seeing this as an obstacle to his material circumstance, he saw it as an exit from his material circumstance. So then, following in the footsteps of the great souls, Mahajanayena Katasapanta, he left that circumstance and took full shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what we can learn from this pastime in the Srimad Bhagvatam with King Anga is that circumstances in this material world will never be in our favor. Actually, all material circumstances will never be in our favor. And the more we try to adjust those circumstances to be in our favor, the more we will be cast into deeper and deeper anxiety. So the message of the Bhagavad Gita is ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate nityam tesam nityabhyukta mam yoga kshema vahamyaham. That you take full shelter of Krishna in all circumstances of your life. You surrender to Krishna at every single moment of your life. And even if things are going against you materially, you can trust that the mercy of Krishna is present. Tat tena nukampam shushamikshmano Bhujana evatman vitam vipakam. Hridvagva pubir vidadam namaste. Jive yumukti pade sadayabak. That even if I have to die, even if I have to fall sick, even if I have to undergo the worst kind of material suffering, if I am depending on Krishna in that circumstance, then I can trust that I am properly situated. I can trust that Krishna will protect me spiritually. And what does that protection mean? My desire to serve will not diminish despite that material discouragement. I will be more and more encouraged to go on serving my spiritual master. I will be more and more encouraged to serving the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu despite those material reversals. Because Krishna will preserve and protect my desire to serve. Arjuna Acharya, a great Acharya in the line, I think, of the Sri Sampradaya, he was a poor Brahmana, and he used to go out begging every day, and he came across this verse in the Bhagavad Gita. And when he was reading this Vahami, that Krishna personally takes charge of the devotees' circumstances in life, he couldn't accept it. So before he went out begging, he took a pen and he scratched out Vahami from the Bhagavad Gita. And then he went out begging. And when he was out begging, his wife was sitting at the door. And two boys came and knocked on the door. One was a beautiful, effulgent black boy, dark skin, Shyama. And then another boy was of a white complexion. And they brought a big, big feast for Arjuna Acharya. They said, "Mother, please accept all of these goods. We've brought them on for your husband, but we need to go immediately. Otherwise, we're worried he may beat us again." That doesn't make sense. Why would my husband beat you? He's a very gentle and kind man. No, he beat us severely. She said, "Prove it." And then they turn around and they show them their back, and there's these big whip marks on their back. So when Arjuna Acharya comes back, his wife says, "Why did you beat those two boys? Why did you beat those two beautiful little boys? What are you speaking about? I don't know what you're speaking about." And then he says, "What did those boys look like?" One was very black and beautiful, and the other one was of a white complexion. And he said, "Marks on the back." And he could immediately understand that Krishna himself had come and provided for his necessities. So in this world, if we're fully dependent on Krishna in every circumstance, we can expect nothing but good fortune. That circumstances will always be in our favor, even if materially they seem to be falling apart. But if we're not dependent on Krishna, and even if we're in the most materially opulent circumstance, the most materially comfortable circumstance, that circumstance is bound to fall apart in due course of time, and due to our not being dependent on Krishna, we will ultimately be defeated by this material world. Parabhavasyavara bhotajato. Due to our material ignorance, we will be defeated and we will be miserable. Hare Krishna. So we can open it up for discussion. It's 8:55, I think. Ends at 9, right? Okay. So any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu.
Actually, one question I have that we hear theoretically that one should be always completely dependent on Krishna and take shelter of him, but when adversaries come, it is very, very hard to feel that Krishna has manifested these things in our life and that false evil is also so strong. So how to take shelter, seek shelter of Bhagavan Krishna in those moments?
Srila Rupa Goswami defines sadhana bhakti in the following way. Kriti sadya bhavat sadya bhavasa sadhanabhita nityasiddhasya bhavasya prakritam hridya sadyata. That sadhana bhakti are those activities which bring about love for Krishna in our heart. And sadhana bhakti means devotional service and practice. So we have to practice being dependent on Krishna, even in circumstances which are favorable materially. We can't ever find ourselves to be too complacent. We should never situate ourselves in a modality of consciousness where we think that this material world is a nice place to be. Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he used to not take rest during the day. And devotees asked him, how can you live like this? You work so hard, but you don't rest. And he said, you see, I have this horrible, this is his words, this horrible, ignorant black body. You're all coming from an Indian background, so you don't have to do so much, but I have to work very hard to become purified. So he said we should be in emergency consciousness. And in the Srimad Bhagvatam, we find a similar example in the life of Maharaj Khatvanga. Maharaj Khatvanga had just won a great war. He was considered to be a valiant hero. And the demigods came to him, and he could have been relishing that fame, that position, that honor and respect, and thought that this material circumstance is very nice. And when the demigods came and offered him a benediction, he was so intelligent that he asked, well, it depends. How much time do I have to live? And they said, well, you only have 2 minutes. So we should understand that our place in this material world, no matter how comfortable it may seem, is extremely precarious. And we have to cultivate that awareness by regular study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam will not allow us to have a comfortable understanding of this world. Vedyam vastam atra vastashivaram tapatrayo mulanam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is existing for the purpose of distinguishing reality from illusion. And it will expose the illusion of this material world. It will expose the tricks of Maya Devi, how she tries to trick us into thinking that we can become comfortable here. She tries to trick us into thinking that if I can only have that house, if I can only have that wife, if I can only have that position, then I can be happy. The Srimad Bhagavatam does not tolerate that illusion. And if we make it a point to regularly study the Srimad Bhagavatam, Yasyam vai shuryamanayam Krishne paramapurushe bhakti upadyate pumsam soka moha payapaha. The soka, the lamentation of this material world, the moha, the illusion of thinking that I can be happy in this material world, and the bhaya, the fearfulness which arises from identification with the material body. All of these things can be eradicated through the attentive hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam and through the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Apanam samsatim goram yanama vivishoganam tata saudyo vimucheta yadbabeti swayam dayam. That if one makes it a point to scrutinizingly study the Srimad Bhagavatam and chant the holy names of Krishna with great eagerness and intensity, then every material circumstance that will be put into, we will see it for what it is. We will see what is written on the label of this material world. We will not only have knowledge of what's written on the label, but we will realize how is the case. We will see the misery of this world and we will experience its temporality. And seeing that misery and temporality will force us to take deeper shelter of the holy names in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we should not take this Krishna consciousness movement for granted. As Srila Prabhupada wrote in a letter to his disciple Shrutadev Prabhu, don't take this movement as some cheap thing. Understand that we are at war with Maya and our circumstance is very precarious. And unless we call out for the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then we are simply drowning in an ocean of our own material conditioning. Is that okay? You have something?
Thank you very much for the wonderful class. Really, each point was like a golden point. So, Prabhuji, you were saying Krishna will protect me. Means like my desire to serve the Lord will not diminish at any circumstance. So, whereas from Bhagavatam we see many places, many examples like the Draupadi protection, Pandava, Sambhavi, Prahlad, Dhruva. So, by seeing those examples, we expect the Lord to protect us externally or even from small, small miseries. But whereas even so many times Lord may not protect, and our faith also might get disturbed. But even we see external protection. Whereas you were saying that our desire to serve the Lord will not diminish, should not be diminished. So that is difficult to understand.
There's examples of how the Lord protects his devotees to desire to serve. Maharaj Bharat, he had fallen in the illusion of thinking that protecting that deer would bring him happiness. And due to his inattentiveness in practice, his foolishness, and his misplaced compassion, he had to take birth in the body of a deer. Shariram yadavatnoti yachchapi ukrama ishvaraha. Grihet vaitani samyanti vayorgandani vashaya. But the Lord protected his desire to be of service. And immediately, upon taking birth in that body of the deer, he realized he had made a great mistake. So he immediately went back to his place of pilgrimage and continued on with his service. And then in the next life, he took birth as Jalad Bharat and was able to speak the most illuminating instructions to King Rahugana. So even if things fall apart materially, Krishna can most definitely protect our material circumstance. But even higher than our material circumstance being protected is that Krishna protects our spiritual desire. No matter how much we may become degraded, if somehow our desire to serve is preserved, apichat du sudaracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadar eva samanvantya samyagva vasito hisaha. No matter how degraded one may become due to circumstances of this world, if somehow the desire to serve is preserved, then Krishna will eventually rectify that person and bring them to a higher state. So if we can somehow protect our faith, this is why the Chaitanya Charitamrita says that we have to be a gardener. Malihan karise bijararopan shravana kirtana jale kariye sechan. We have to nourish the bhakti lata with the water of hearing and chanting. Because through the nourishing of that bhakti lata, then our faith to want to go on serving is preserved. And then even if our material circumstances fall apart, if that desire to serve is present, savai pumsam paro dharmo yator bhaktir hoksaje ahoyutikiya pratiyata eyatmam suprasidati. Because that desire to serve cannot be obstructed by any material circumstances, Krishna will give us the intelligence from within our heart, seeing our sincere desire to want to be of service, to find a way to go on serving. Okay. Probably everyone, more questions, good. They asked about 15 questions yesterday in Hubli, so we're not going to try to break that record, but we can keep going.
Here, demigods were not coming to sacrifice to take their share. And then Anga Maharaj requested that they have to please the Supreme Lord.
Yeah.
We hear that the Supreme Lord is not directly present. We cannot approach Supreme Lord directly. Rather, we should approach Supreme Lord through the servants.
Mm.
So how can we correlate one? How can we
Reconcile.
reconcile these two things? That Anga Maharaj is approaching Supreme Lord directly, though the demigods are not pleased.
Mm. Well, we can see that in many cases in the Srimad Bhagavatam, circumstances are being arranged by the Lord for a specific purpose. My understanding is that King Anga was a great soul, so ultimately he was approaching Vishnu as his final recourse because things weren't manifesting the way they were supposed to be through worshiping the demigods. And it says that due to his karma, he wasn't bound to have a son. But we see that once he had the son, that circumstance was not favorable. So he abandoned that circumstance and took shelter. But then we see from King Vena, what manifested out of King Vena was the Palana Shakti of the Lord, the Shakti Avesh avatar, Maharaj Prithu. So everything in the Srimad Bhagavatam is there to remind us that Krishna's will is very difficult to understand, as Bhishma Dev says. That to understand the will of Krishna is extremely difficult and practically impossible for the living entity. And many times in the midst of experiencing great calamity, experiencing great reversals, we may not be able to perceive Krishna's hand in our life. But I have a friend, Mahotsa Prabhu in America. He once told me that if you put your life in the hands of God, then you'll see God's hand in everything. You put your life in God's hands, you see God's hands in everything. So many times in the midst of our reversals and many times in the midst of our material tribulation, we may not be able to perceive Krishna's will. And you can see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's many circumstances in which the devotee is not able to perceive how this is Krishna's will. But only later on are they able to appreciate how Krishna was personally present in guiding those circumstances, manipulating those circumstances in a particular way in order to manifest the greatness of his devotees. So this pastime glorifies King Anga, how despite the fact he did his best to perform his duties very rigidly, King Vena was born, and that birth of King Vena gave him the opportunity to take full shelter of Krishna. And then from King Vena, we see how Maharaj Parikshit was manifested. So we can't understand necessarily some details of the Bhagavatam, such as, approaching the demigods who are the representatives of Krishna and then approaching Krishna. Those things may be difficult to understand, and there may not even be answers that are given by the acharyas. But if we can see the overall picture of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Dharma kotritabait avo paramo nirmatsaramam satam. That if we can see how the Srimad Bhagavatam is not interested in preserving a single iota of materialistic consciousness, a single iota of material desire, and it is simply directing us towards taking full shelter of Krishna, then everything can be reconciled through that principle. And this is what Jiva Goswami explains in his Sandarbhas. The Paribhasa Sutra of the Srimad Bhagavatam is Ete Kamsa Kalam Pumsam Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. That ultimately Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the details of the Bhagavatam may be difficult to reconcile sometimes. It may be a bit jarring in the mind. For instance, Maharaj Chitraketu didn't commit any offense to Lord Shiva, but Parvati took it as an offense, so he had to be cursed. But in the course of him being cursed, he was glorified as a devotee, and then he became even more glorified through his prayers of Vritrasura, which are considered some of the most refined prayers in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So the details of that pastime, they can be difficult to put all together. But if one can keep the vision of the overall context of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that all of this is directing us towards Krishna. All of this is directing us towards the type of surrender which is required to approach Krishna. Nayam sukapo bhagavan, dehinam gopikasutaha, jnaninam chatmabhutanam, takritam chapi padyate. That if one sees the type of devotion that Mother Yashoda has, if one sees the type of devotion the cowherd boys have, if one sees the type of devotion that the gopis have, there's no reservations in that surrender. There's nothing which holds those devotees back from wanting to serve Krishna. And that type of surrender, that type of dedication, that type of focus is what the Srimad Bhagvatam is trying to pull out of us. So if we always have that vision in mind in our study of the Srimad Bhagvatam, then all seeming contradictions can be reconciled, because that will be pulled out of us through our study of the Bhagavatam. Is that okay? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, like, the meanwhile in the class you're mentioning about Ahankara Vimodatma Karta Hai. That everything we think what we are doing is just a Maya's joke upon us. Maya is joking with us, saying all these things and showing these things, and we are getting misidentified. But in our conditioned state, that appears to be natural and very appealing for us. Whereas the things which Prabhupada is giving us, Srimad Bhagavatam, given things, they appear to be very far away from us.
What's that?
The Maya's allurements and whatever the joke of Maya on us, it appears to be very appealing for us in the conditioned state. And in the immediate sense, like, okay, let me do this because nature of living entity is to get happiness. So in the immediate sense, okay, Maya's joke appears to be giving happiness, let me engage in that. Whereas in Krishna, it's very long process, very long time. When will I get happiness? So it appears to be very difficult in an immediate sense. Like how to get determination on Krishna's words, on Srimad Bhagavatam, and keep going ahead, even though sometimes we may not get the happiness which we are expecting. Whereas here, on the other side, Maya's immediate happiness is like assured.
I would say if a devotee is going through this internally, then the first thing that they should analyze is how much are they studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, and how intense is their chanting of Hare Krishna, and how much service are they putting out for the mission, how much are they trying to give Krishna consciousness to other people. If these three things are out of alignment, then Maya's allurement will seem very, very attractive, and one won't be getting a higher taste. But if one's applying the process of Krishna consciousness properly, Raja Vidya Raja Guyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Prakyaksha Vyam Dharmam Susukam Kartavavayam. And Krishna consciousness is full of happiness at every step. And the happiness which one experiences from practicing Krishna consciousness gives one the strength. Vishaya Vanivartante Hirashashasa Dehinam Raso Varjam Raso Piyasya Param Drishva Nivartate. The strength that one gets to overcome the allurements of Maya, they can only come if one is getting a taste for Krishna consciousness. Yad pada pankaja palasha vilasa vaktya karma shrayam ugratitam ugrayanti shantam tadvan narikta matayo yatayo piruta shoto ganastararanam bhajamvasu devam. That if one's tasting the vilas of serving the lotus feet of Krishna, then the waves of material desire cannot overcome that person because of the joy they're experiencing serving Krishna. But if one is approaching Krishna consciousness in an intellectual way, or in a perspective way, means one's approaching Krishna with some hidden motive. Many times devotees can fall into the trap of putting material enjoyment, perspective, over a mood of service, or they can put intellect over a mood of service. But as long as one's priority is material enjoyment mixed with bhakti, or one's intellectual longings, intellectual doubts is given more precedent in one's service attitude, then one won't actually be able to relish the purity of Shuddha Bhakti. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it teaches, Shara Shabde Vishas Kohe Sudrit Nishchai Krishna Bhakti Kaila Sarva Karma Kritta Hai. That faith, which is the prerequisite for pure devotional service, is understanding that the only way I can be satisfied, the only way I can be happy is by giving myself fully to Krishna without any consideration of material happiness and without any consideration of intellectual longing. That I'm giving myself to Krishna in a mood of love, in a mood of devotion, in a mood of offering my entire words, body, mind, and life to Krishna out of love. If that is the motivation of one's devotion, then there's no question of one becoming allured by material circumstances. But due to our lack of faith, due to our lack of nourishing our faith through the study of Bhagavatam, through the study of Chaitanya Charitamrita, we become attracted to the material energy again. Purno mushtiko sambhavam. Again become a mouse. So a sadhaka has a grave responsibility to nourish the bhakti lata, to feed the bhakti lata, to see that their faith in the process of full surrender is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. Otherwise, at any moment, one can be diverted by desires for jnana or desires for bhoga. This is why Jiva Goswami says that the desires for material enjoyment and the desires for intellectual pursuits are like two witches which dance inside the heart of the devotee. So those witches of material enjoyment and jnana, desires for intellectual pursuits, those things need to be driven out of the heart with the pure vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because the Srimad Bhagavatam, the byproduct of it will be Tadapuna Mukta Samasta Bandhanas Tad Bhava Bhava Anukrita Shayakriti. The byproduct of that will be that by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, the devotion that's present within the personalities of the Bhagavatam will rub off on our heart. Just as an iron rod inside a fire develops the same qualities as iron. That will become a part of our study. That will become a part of us. It will rub off. So we need to experience that constantly. If we're not in constant touch with the Srimad Bhagavatam, then the witches of material enjoyment and intellectual pursuit can attack us at any moment and make us think that devotional service isn't bringing me satisfaction. But it's not a matter of devotional service bringing satisfaction. It's a matter of your improper application of the process of devotional service. Is that okay? Hare Krishna. Do we have time? It's 9:20. I don't want to make anyone an anxiety if this space needs to be used for anything. Okay.
Prabhupada has given us this wonderful morning program in which one can very nicely do chanting and hearing and all that, but sometimes devotees also say that some rounds if one, because sometimes schedule is like that, in the daytime one may not get time, he is working like that. So if we can wake up early somewhat and do some extra rounds of kind of these things, but the sheer determination to wake up early and every single day very wonderfully attend morning program. Sometimes one may be traveling or one may have slept late due to seva, but that priority of morning program is not there in the life due to lack of sheer determination, and that state of emergency and urgency is not there in the life. So what can be done?
It's explained that distress in life is due to lack of a sufficient goal. If we understand how refined it is what we're trying to achieve, love for Krishna, how high of an aspiration that is, then we would be willing to accept whatever it takes in order to achieve that. But because we lack awareness of Krishna's exalted position. We lack awareness of the exalted nature of bhakti. We take it very cheaply. So we miss the morning program. We chant rounds in such a way that we're becoming inattentive. We chant while we're on the cell phone. We chant while we're, walking around or talking to a friend, riding on a train, riding on a bus. And we miss out on the opportunity to take advantage of Krishna's mercy. But if we have awareness of what it is we're trying to achieve, of how wonderful it is that we're trying to achieve, then we wouldn't lack that determination, because we would have sufficient knowledge of a proper goal. And that awareness of the goal will make our determination, our attention very fixed. But if we don't have awareness of the goal, if we don't have attention focused on that goal, then Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam taya prata chetasam vyasyatmika buddhir samudo navadiyate. Sense gratification can very easily knock us off the path. So we have to pray, we have to beg, we have to come before the deities and ask for them to please help us, because we're in a very fallen condition. Gauranga bolite habe puraka sharira. Hari Hari bolite nayane babe nira. Abe kabe nitai chandre karuna hoibe. Samsara vasana mora sada tuchahabe. Samsara vasana. That if we become fixed in the service of Nityananda Prabhu, if we somehow can grab onto the feet of Nityananda Prabhu's intimate associate in the form of Sri Guru, if we can somehow take advantage of that mercy and apply the instructions which that magnanimous personality has given to us, which is imparted into our heart, then there'll be no question of lack of determination or lack of attention. But if we're not begging for it, if we're not praying for it, if we're not understanding how exalted of a goal that it is what we're trying to achieve, and we're not seeing how far we are from that goal, then we can take Krishna consciousness very cheaply and not be determined to achieve that goal. But if we can take advantage of the gifts which have been given to us, then that determination will always be manifested into our heart due to the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu and the mercy of the Guru. So, if one wants to develop determination in devotional service, one should give their life, mind, body, and words completely to the service of the spiritual master. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Presenting flowers, and you explained about how intensely eagerly we should be for chanting the holy name and reading Srimad Bhagvatam and following the instruction of our superiors and Guru. So such a enlightening class for us. Let us thank Prabhuji, Devavrata Prabhu, by one time loudly chanting Hare Krishna Bhagavatam.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare.
So tomorrow also we are having another class by Devavrata Prabhu, and Monday Bhagavatam class is also by Devavrata Prabhu. Please come to attend and be on time. Hare Krishna.